Hey everybody, how you doing? Welcome back. This is Jim Grisanzio from the Oracle Groundbreakers team, and I'm here with John Beresniewicz from Oracle, and we're going to have a conversation here because John is one of the speakers at the Oracle Groundbreakers India Yatra, which is wrapping up this week, 3-week conference, big, massive show, very successful, actually hugely successful, lots of participants, lots of speakers, lots of technology, Java, a database, open source, lots of technologies, everything from Oracle. So, John, how you doing? What's going on back there in California? You're in Half Moon Bay, I understand, huh?
Yep, we're in Half Moon Bay, and it's a typical summer day today. Very foggy and rather
Foggy,
chill.
chilly, exactly.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
beautiful surf
Uh,
right there. And
some
yeah,
days,
no,
yeah,
yeah. I used to live in San Francisco. I was in Silicon Valley for about 8 years, so Half Moon Bay was always just over the hill, right? So,
yeah,
um,
exactly. That's how we call it, over the hill
yeah,
from
over the hill.
we're probably about 15 miles due west of headquarters in Redwood Shores,
Yeah.
right on the ocean.
So,
Yeah.
John, we just met here for the first time. You're speaking at this conference, and I specifically reached out to do interviews with people that I didn't know. And I've been in this job for about 4 years, but doing this particular function for about 3 years. So I haven't met everybody yet, and in the Oracle sphere. And so I just basically weeded out the people that I knew and reached out to the people that I didn't know.
There you
And
go.
I'm going to have to explain that to them. But there's not enough time. There's just too many speakers here to do everybody. So anyway, I would love for you to maybe give us a little summary of who you are, what you do, and then we can take it from there.
So I'm actually recently rehired at Oracle in last August, and given what's happened since then, I'm very thankful uh, to be back. But I did spend 11 years at Oracle between 2002 and 2014, and so most of my Oracle career involves that period. Um, Right now, I work in Enterprise and Cloud Manageability Group, which is where EM Enterprise Manager currently exists. And indeed, I originally joined Oracle as part of the Enterprise Manager team back in 2002. Um, at the time, I had been involved previous to that in a startup that did basically an Oracle database diagnostic tool. Startup was called Savant, and the tool was a very kind of visual presentation of what's happening inside an Oracle database. So some of what I'll talk about at the conference really kind of dates back to those days at Savant when our principal use case was we wanted to show DBAs what's going on in the database. The database was this very sophisticated machine and with lots of things happening inside, and we wanted to kind of give people some kind of a window into that machinery. And prior to that, when now we're talking sort of the 80s and early 90s, I was what I like to call DBA 1.0, right? So I was kind of part of I would say, the first generation of real DBAs. And I associate that with the transition in Oracle from sort of version 5 to version 6. I started as a version 5, and in version 5, all the documents came in a little book that was about this wide, and it was, the DBA guide, the developer guide, and the SQL Plus manual or something like that. And so you could run the whole show yourself, version 5,
Wow.
developer or DBA. And then in 6, it really kind of jumped in complexity by an order of magnitude. We had these $V things, and they were exposing all kinds of internals. And shared global area was, big and complicated, and so that's kind of when I think DBA 1.0 was born, and I was one of those early DBAs. We used to measure our databases in gigabytes, right? Terabyte, and memory was megabytes, right? So it was a different world. There was, the scale of things today is when I think about those days, it's pretty mind blowing, just kind of how far things have come. Of course, that was quite a while ago. In Enterprise Manager, I did a lot of work on core database performance area, what is customers will recognize as diagnostic and tuning packs. So a database performance page, top activity page, ADDM, AWR, SQL Tuning Advisor, SQL Performance Analyzer. All of those were the features that I spent a lot of time working on user interfaces to those diagnostic and tuning features. And I would say that's most of what I did in 11 years at Oracle. I mean, that spans a lot of projects and a lot of versions. Yeah. Now, currently, we're basically working on replatforming and also designing some new services for OCI, for the OCI Gen 2, so the current OCI architecture. That's the basis for our cloud. And so we're working on database-centric services, core performance management and monitoring, as well as some capacity planning. We have a service coming out called SQL Warehouse, which is interesting. So anyway.
Cool. All right. Well,
that's what I'm up to.
Earlier on there, you mentioned visualization, and it's actually a very interesting topic because these systems are so big and massively complex, and no one can know it all. No one has written it all. It's written by large teams, and being able to have intelligent vision into it is also a challenge. Whatever it is, like a kernel or a database or whatever. So the substance of your talk for this conference has got an interesting title for me. I kind of flagged me a couple of words here. Data visualization research experiments using ASH data. So I get two questions on this.
Right.
What's ASH, and also research experiments? That sounds very sciencey to me. So
right. Yeah, it does. So ASH stands for it's an acronym for Active Session History, and so the talk is really about Active Session History is DBAs will be very familiar with it, but what it represents is basically a collection of very fine-grained snapshots of system activity at the level of database sessions, where if you're familiar with Oracle, all application level work pretty much happens underneath in the context of a database session, either a user or an application connecting to the database and executing SQL. And so the active session history, which is technology that was introduced in Oracle 10, and was really part and parcel of what I spent most of my career at Oracle doing, which is exposing database manageability features, of which active session history was one of the, I would say, principal and most important components. That technology basically is a built-in mechanism by which session state is captured once per second and persisted off into memory first and then eventually onto disk. And so what it really represents is, I like to think of it as a huge, almost videographic kind of record of what happened in the database. And the only problem is that, we need the right glasses to see into that and to actually see what was happening, because so much of what happened during some period of time in the database is captured by ASH, by active session history. It's just a history of what went on a second-by-second basis. And yet, the issue is really, how can we kind of translate that into something that tells us what went on in some meaningful way, right? And so we've done a lot of work in that area. People will be familiar with the top activity page in Diagon Tuning Pack. There's another feature we have called Ash Analytics. And both of those are user interfaces into Oracle database performance that are based on summarizing Ash data. And so the talk really represents sort of, some experiments maybe on the fringes or at the outer edges, things that we can't necessarily design into products because we don't even know whether they will work or not. And so it really represents, kind of some of my research. I call it research because there's things waiting to be discovered. And so to me, that's research. You're like,
Right.
You have an idea. I wonder about this. Let me investigate it. And here the investigations actually constitute different ways to summarize and visualize Ash data and apply visual kind of visualization constructs to different variables in the Ash data. It really is a matter of discovering cool things. And so that's why I call it research. You don't know ahead of time. You say, well, what if I do this and I make that and I map this variable to color and that other one to the X axis and I take a log scale for this and what's that going to look like, right? Well,
Right.
You just got to write the code and see. And then sometimes you go, whoa, okay, that's pretty cool. And that's when you discover something. So. And I think I actually have a discovery that I will be showing during my presentation. So,
Cool. That's great.
I'll put that out as a teaser.
Well, I mean, this is, that's why I specifically asked about it, because I follow science. I'm very interested in science. I used to work for some research universities when I was younger. And so I've been around scientists a lot, and doctors, physicians, veterinarians, biologists. And now in this field, I'm around computer scientists, so this whole process of discovery interests me. And so that's why I kind of flagged it in that title, because, if I'm a DBA and I'm managing these systems, and I'm not a DBA and I'm not managing these systems, and that's a good thing, I can assure you. But nevertheless, if we need to imagine this. I can imagine a scenario where I would want to know, not necessarily need to know, but want to know something that is going on for the purposes of imagining what could be a reality, an opportunity. In other words, if this, then that, right? So thinking in those terms. Secondly, just to understand what's going on more than I would need to simply manage, the system. And so it's a great service you're doing, because I would imagine that because everybody I talk to thinks along these lines, to one degree or another, because they're technical people and they're coming from a science background. And so they must be thinking along these lines as well. What could be happening there that I might actually need or want? Maybe it could be a new feature in the product, right?
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, these things have happened. I mean, the Ash Analytics load map, for instance, was really a direct result of some research experiments that I'd done using tree maps on Ash data. And actually, in the sense that what I was interested in was, more real-time kind of interfaces, and I thought that tree maps on top of Ash data might work for that. And it turns out they were really terrible for that, because the cells would reorganize with every refresh, which is not what you want if you're trying to pay attention to something. You don't want it to run around the screen. But it ended up being, in a more static view, sort of a tree map assembled out of multiple Ash dimensions, sort of organized as a pseudo hierarchy, was a very effective way to look for problem signatures in what's happening in the database. And by problem signature, really what I mean is, when we attack database performance problems, we kind of look for where the big time is being spent and try and shrink that down, right? Because database time is user time, you shrink that down, then users get their answers faster. That's kind of the meta principle. And so what we look for is, imbalances in how database time is being sort of spent inside the database. And this business about a multidimensional tree map organized around various dimensions from ASH, of which there are dozens. There's actually over 100 in current versions of ASH. It became a very powerful way to sort of look for combinations of indicators that were accumulating or causing the accumulation of large amounts of time. And if that kind of, that combination of indicators might point you at a root cause, right? And so that was sort of and all that was kind of, the outcome of this research, so-called, that I had done, sort of applying a certain visualization, the tree map, to a certain kind of ASH. So, I kind of been doing this thing for a while, I guess.
When are you giving the talk?
Talk is Thursday morning at 9 a.m. my time.
Your time, okay.
So the 16th, 9 a.m. California time.
Yeah, cool.
Which I think amounts to pretty late India time.
That's late. But they go right up till 10 p.m. here.
I've been very impressed by the conference, I'd like to say that. They've been, a lot of social media stuff. I mean, I'm a pretty low-key social media guy, but lately all of my, my Twitter is like, Yatra.
It's the thing is, when you go there, by the way, that's really good to hear, because this is the first time they're doing this virtually, and I've spoken to Sai, and it's taken an enormous amount of work because they do things at scale, as you can tell.
Yeah.
When you go there and go to one of these events live, I don't know, have you been to India for one of their events?
No, I haven't.
It's something to see, just from a project management experience of how they put on conferences. A large team of people actually manage it in the field, all in their own time. Everyone's a volunteer. A lot of attendees, a lot of activity, very low-key, but very interesting. They do very interesting things that you wouldn't expect from another conference. They bring the culture of India into the conference. It's not just forklift from Silicon Valley, okay? It's not just a California thing. It's a genuine Indian experience. And they're, separate from that, these are smart engineers. Right, so they're talking tech at a very serious level, and so anyway, I'm glad to see that the online conference has gone well. I've attended a few sessions. I presented one as well, and I was also very impressed. But I've been busy doing these interviews, so I haven't attended as many as I would have liked to. I've gotten 2 or 3 or 4 in, actually on top of my own, on top of my own talk, but. Yeah. This actually brings us into the community thing. I also wanted to talk about the community because you were saying a little bit earlier before we started recording that you've been involved in user groups over the years and hundreds, as you said, and hundreds of presentations. I can't even imagine that, and I do this for a living. But I mean, that also seems like it's an important part of where you come from in terms of being a technologist.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, especially, so I started in the user community action really as a part of being a co-founder of Savant Corporation and having to market our product to DBAs. And so, we're a pretty small operation, not much money, and that was pretty good way to get in front of our potential users and customers, and so I can remember back in like the late 90s, I think one of my first sort of popular presentations was called Probing for Problems in $V tables, and so it was very much about running little queries that could show you who was blocking and who was locking and who was having a bad day, kind of thing. And DBAs love that stuff, right? Because back then, $V tables were really the kind of cool. They were very cool new things. Now probably, you learn about them in the first day of DBA kindergarten or something, right? So that was really fun, and that presentation was actually pretty good for me from a point of view of doing presentations, because I was a very nervous presenter, and I was kind of the guy that got all red when he had to do the book report in grade school and stuff, right? And actually speak in front of people, but probing for problems was pretty cool, because all the user groups wanted to hear it, and there was a lot of user groups. There were a lot of small user groups, and we were on the East Coast. There was a bunch up and down the East Coast, and not too far away. And so, after like the 10th time I did the thing, it was kind of hard to be nervous about it anymore, because I realized, hey, you're not going to die. And if if you don't say anything for 30 seconds, nobody cares but you, right? And all these other things that, kind of relieved me of all the tension. And that really served me pretty well. So over the years, I've done a lot of presentations, certainly at Oracle. I've been at Oracle Open World many times. And some of the other big user groups, Rocky Mountain user group, I used to do that at Savant, and I've done it a number of times at Oracle. A few of the others.
You mentioned
not
going to
overseas. Anyway, go ahead.
Really, you mentioned not going to die. It was kind of interesting. Also, another thing to remember is that in general, the audiences are rooting for you.
Exactly.
I've never been to this. This might not be true in comedy, but in general, in tech, the audiences, they're geeks, they're technical people. They're not there to. They might be critical in the sense of questioning you or something, but they're not there to see you screw up. My experience is that they're actually cheering for you. So
right.
And because I too struggled with my own presenting. I've done very little compared to you, but it's a big deal for me. So I know exactly how you feel. So
well, when you only do it once, you see, that was the key. When I was doing that same thing over and over and over again, it was pretty much, I was doing it in my sleep by the end, and then I was able to realize, you don't have to be nervous,
Yeah.
You made that mistake. Nobody shot you, So.
All right, John. Well, it was really great talking to you tonight.
Yeah, likewise.
Data visualization research experiments using Ash data. So cool. You're going to do this in a couple of days, and I hope it goes well. And maybe when the world gets back to normal, because I know this is the new normal, but I actually reject that. This should be known as the temporary abnormal. And so hopefully we will see you at a conference around town sometime.
Okay. Thanks, Jim.
Okay. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks.
Yep.
Bye-bye now.
Okay. Bye.